Hi, in today's video we'll be talking about the DJI OSMO Action again. I'll be talking specifically about the time-lapse functionalities and what I consider to be some of the best practices in order to get the best settings depending on the situation. Let's turn on the camera. Now firstly, you press the lower bottom left button. In the video section you can select into time-lapse and you click on the clock icon. You swipe from the bottom. On the top right hand side you'll see the resolution, so you can toggle it and switch between 4K, 1080p and 2.7K. Now on the top setting you can see the interval. This is where you set the interval of which the picture or frame is recorded into the camera. In the bottom you can see the video duration. So essentially it will tell you how long that the time-lapse is going to run for. So in the middle you can see is the video duration. Now if you change the interval, of course the video duration will decrease or increase based on your selection. So essentially if you're using a longer interval, the video duration will be shorter if you're using the same duration. So for example, if you have a 2-second interval and you set it to 30 minutes duration, essentially it means that the time-lapse will be running for 30 minutes and the end result will be a 30-second video. Now the interval is dependent on the shutter speed that you set in the settings, which you can access from the right hand side. Now at the top you can see you can toggle between auto or manual. In this case I'd like to use manual a lot depending on the type of time-lapse. In your manual settings you could adjust the ISO. So click on the ISO button, you can change it from a value of 1 to 3200. Now for the shutter speed, it will depend on the type of time-lapse you're taking. For example, let's say if you have a 1-second shutter speed, then you can see in the interval settings that the minimum interval is 2 seconds. Now the way it works is that the 2-second interval includes the 1-second shutter speed, meaning that if you set the interval for 2 seconds with a 1-second shutter speed, the gap between each shot will be at 1 second and not at 2 seconds, as you can see in the setting. It's a bit different than conventional mirrorless cameras in which the interval is actually the interval between the two shots. Now I say this because if you change the shutter speed, let's say to a higher number, to 2 seconds for example, the minimum interval is 3 seconds, meaning that there'll be a gap of 1 second between each shot. Again, if you increase the shutter speed even further, let's say 5 seconds, then you can see that the minimum interval is 8 seconds. Now by doing so, you can get long exposures using the longer shutter speed. You can see that the interval between the two shots will be a lot longer, so your image might be a little bit more jumpier. To get a smooth time-lapse, I'd suggest that you use small interval, as small as you can. Again, even if I'm shooting at night time, I'll set the shutter speed to 1.3 seconds at the maximum just to get that minimum interval of 2 seconds. Now by doing that, you don't have to run the time-lapse too long. As you can see, if you have a 2-second interval and you're running the time-lapse for half an hour, you get a video duration of 30 seconds. So again, 30 seconds for 30 minutes of shooting is quite good. Okay, so let's say if you change it to a shutter speed of 5 seconds, the interval itself becomes 8 seconds. So if you're running the time-lapse for 30 minutes, you'll get a total video duration of 7 seconds. In order for you to get around 30 seconds as like the previous settings, you need to run the time-lapse for 2 hours. So 2 hours would be a little bit long for this camera, since that the battery life wouldn't last as long. So keep that in mind. If you're running long time lapses with this camera, then you might need to add an external power bank just to keep the battery alive when shooting the time lapse itself. So again, I'd keep the ISO as low as I can. If you need to raise the ISO, I'd keep it at a maximum of 400 so it doesn't ruin the image too much. In addition to the manual setting, you could use auto if you want, but I find that the auto is quite limiting because you're limited at a shutter speed of a maximum of 1/8 of a second. So in that case, you're not going to be able to take any time lapses in the night time or in low light conditions because the camera is not really going to see anything. Even if you boost up ISO, again, I recommend the maximum to be at 400 at the most. And of course, going for holy grail shots will be out of the picture as well, because again, it's not a low light camera because of the small sensor size. Now if you click on the video icon on the bottom right of the menu, this is where you can set up your white balance, your dewarp or your format. And I usually keep the dewarping to off because I like to correct it in post. For format, I just select the video settings itself because it creates the video for you and you don't need to do any post-production in Lightroom and so on. I mean, you could change it to JPEG and video, but I don't think that that will be too useful, so I just tend to keep it a video. So that's one of the first ways of setting the time lapse. I hope this video helps you a lot. So I mean, I'll be seeing you in the next video. Thank you.